Take your seats. I think we're going to get started. Thank you so much for coming here for this wonderful celebration. I'm Karen Peltz-Strauss. I'm the Deputy Bureau Chief of the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau here at the FCC. And it is my privilege to be able to welcome you to this event. It is really exciting to be able to mark the 25th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act in the same year that we can celebrate the 5th anniversary of the CVAA, the 21st Century Communications and Video Programming Video Accessibility Act. I get the name of that always wrong, and I have no idea why. It's a privilege, truly, to be in the company of so many distinguished advocates who have worked tirelessly to break down accessibility barriers. Today, you're going to be able to hear from several individuals who not only benefit from these laws, but help put them into place. The laws are a product of extraordinary grassroots efforts that occurred over several decades. They involve persistence of overcoming hurdles, of great amount of negotiation, conciliation, and cooperation that goes on even today. I truly want to applaud the heroes in this room that are sitting at this table and many of you who are sitting in the audience. Each of the laws that we celebrate today represents powerful tools to eradicate discrimination. They opened doors that had been closed and removed obstacles that prevented people with disabilities from accessing our nation's communications and information systems. They made society more inclusive and have enabled all Americans to achieve when given the opportunity to do so. The FCC has been at the forefront of this effort to tear down communications barriers. The Commission has been dedicated from the start to ensuring that people who are deaf and hard of hearing, people who are blind or visually impaired, people who are deafblind, and people that have speech disabilities, as well as people that have cognitive disabilities and other types of physical disabilities, have the access that they need to telephones, televisions, and more recently, of course, the Internet. Now more than ever, the Commission is committed to and working diligently to keep up with the changing times. We all know how fast technology changes, and we're working to keep up with technologies to make sure that people with disabilities are not left behind as innovative and cool new products and services continue to come onto the market. I would like to introduce you to Allison Cutler, if you would not mind standing up, the Chief of the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau, who is the latest in a long list of staff people here at the Commission and officials here at the Commission who are dedicated to furthering the advancement of accessibility for people with disabilities. You already know how committed our chairman is. You already know how committed all of our commissioners are by the votes that they've entered on virtually all disability matters. You'll be hearing from several of them later on. They should be coming in about an hour or so. So as we go through the different testimonials, we may pause at various times. If I didn't already mention it, this event is webcast, so this will not only be shared with the people in this room, but fortunately everyone that can access it online. I again want to applaud the heroes in this room, and as well as the staff from the FCC, from all of the bureaus who took the words of the laws that we celebrate today and made sense of them in regulations that are now the law of the land. Before we begin, I want to specifically recognize the staff of our outreach division in CGB. If you could stand up, all of you who are from CAOD, and a large round of applause. Events like this don't happen overnight. They happen over weeks and sometimes months, and they look seamless when they're put on, but they're because of the fine work of this group. And I also would like to have the individuals in the Disability Rights Office stand up. I would like to again applaud these individuals for the amazing job that they do day to day on a basis to implement the laws that we celebrate today. And without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to the panel, and I am sure that you are going to be fascinated and truly enjoy the various stories and history that you're about to hear. Thank you. Oh, and just one more thing. Please stay around for the great refreshments at the end of the program. Greg?
Thanks, Karen. Good afternoon, everybody. Before we proceed, I want to give special recognition to one person who really brought this entire event together, Cheryl King. Unfortunately, Cheryl is not here in person today, but I want to thank her for her assistance in coordinating this event, and I know she really wanted to be here. It's an amazing event. 25 years since the passage of the ADA is an amazing opportunity and a good opportunity for us to get together and have some reflections on what we have accomplished with the ADA, as well as take an opportunity to recognize the CVAA and the effect that it has on all of us as individuals, hear some stories from individuals, and before I turn it over to these impressive individuals in this panel, which honestly overwhelms me with your presence today. I'm just honestly overwhelmed, and I do want to hear what you have to say, as we all do. But before I turn it over to you guys, I have just a personal story I wanted to tell you. Obviously, I'm here in a professional role, but it does personally impact me as well. So I'm kind of giving you a little combination of the two, if you don't mind. When I was a student at Gallaudet University in 1988, I'm sure many of you know what happened. It was in the news that year that for one particular week in 1988, the Gallaudet students protested the lack of a deaf president. Hold that thought for just one moment. After the Deaf President Now movement, we also had an individual that was often referred to as the father of the ADA, Justin Dart. Honestly, every time I met Justin Dart, he thanked me. He thanked me for my time at Gallaudet. He also thanked Gallaudet for the Deaf President Now movement. The reason why he was so thankful was, as Karen has said, there were many grassroots efforts going on across the country, because it was really, everyone was wanting a civil rights legislation, if you will. It had been since 1964, since the civil rights movement, but yet there was no recognition for people with disabilities in the United States. So individual grassroots efforts had been underway, but it wasn't until the protest at Gallaudet in 1988 that got Congress's attention, as well as the attention of the nation, that finally the marching orders were put into place for there to be an ADA. And it was passed, the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990. I happened to be there at the White House when President Bush signed it. It was middle of summer, quite warm. I know many of you were there as well. It was a good time to get together, just like it is today. Very good memory. At the signing event, and I'll tell you, it was a hot July day, I remember I had to catch a plane right after the event. I was going to the National Association for the Deaf convention. So I was literally running to catch a plane. I happened to see I. King Jordan, who became the first deaf president of Gallaudet University, in first class on my plane. Now, I was way at the back of the plane in coach. But it was a good day. So if you could, briefly just give us quick remarks on who you are, who you represent, and affiliations, personal stories, remarks that you might have with the ADA or CVAA. There will be some questions afterward, but if you could kind of just give us a quick little informal intro, if you will. Hopefully this will be a bit of a dialogue. I guess we can go ahead and start with Al Sonnenstrahl, and I think you'll understand why. No? Are we? Hold on one second, having a quick discussion. Sorry, Karen was reminding me that I'm supposed to remind you, since there are 9 of us here, if we could keep our remarks brief to around 5 minutes if possible. So I'll go ahead and start with Al, and the reason I will start with Al, I think he'll explain himself, honestly. Thanks, Greg. Wow, I was there during the Deaf President Now movement under your leadership. Here we are. You're now leading a panel. You led the student body government protest then. Now you're leading the panel. So I'd like to talk about the implementation of the ADA and the evolvement of the FCC's involvement. So back to 1988, when the ADA was first introduced by Senator Lowell Wecker of Connecticut. In the original bill, the requirement was that every store, every restaurant, basically everywhere, have a TTY available. Of course, that bill died in committee. Wecker then became the governor of Connecticut, passed the baton to Senator Tom Harkin of Iowa. Along with Senator Harkin were folks like Frank Bowe, Bobby Silverstein, Katie Bay, and I'm naming these individuals because honestly they had a very important role in the passage of the ADA. These individuals met with leaders in the deaf community, including people from Gallaudet University's Law Center, like Cy Dubois, and someone else, whose name escapes me, begins with a K, maybe Karen Peltz-Strauss, who's sitting here in the front row and just spoke a second ago. Yes, she was involved back in that day as well. So these individuals met with leaders from Gallaudet University, TDI, and the National Association for the Deaf. On a personal note, one of the leaders from the group from NAD happened to be Albert Leibach. You might recognize the last name, Greg's dad. So these folks met and discussed and agreed to make some changes and present it as Title IV, which really became which turned into the implementation of Telecommunications Relay Service, or TRS, as well as the built-in TV Decoder Chip Act, 911 access. All of these issues were pulled out into separate individual bills from what at that time had been a consolidated bill. The Senate committee, during a Senate committee hearing, I happened to be there with Karen at this one particular hearing, we noticed that there was a lot of resistance to this bill. In the middle of the hearing, Senator Bob Dole from Kansas walked in, sat down, and pronounced that he had just come from the White House and that the President Bush, 41, was first against it, but then Dole quoted some of the safeguards that were currently in Section 504, written by John Wodach, and mentioned that those would be incorporated into the ADA bill. The committee, after Dole gave that explanation, agreed to incorporate many of those provisions. It continued to work its way through. The decoder bill made its way through. .911 access, however, didn't move. You may wonder why. I think people thought it was $50,000 to buy one TTY, and I can tell you that's not even close to it. We're talking a couple $100. And it would take years and years of training to have to, explain to 911 dispatchers how to use a TTY. I honestly think that was part of the reason why it didn't move, but it just didn't move, whatever the real reason was. The ADA, however, passed the House and passed the Senate. Different versions, understanding. But then they were consolidated. The day before that, however, Katie Bay, Bobby Silverstein, and Frank Bowe met and asked Karen Peltz-Strauss to write some language literally overnight, and she worked overnight, and at 10 the next morning, it was a Tuesday, had that language included in the report. At 2 that afternoon, it happened very quickly. At 2 is when the House and the Senate met. They passed the House report, the full House report, and therefore the ADA passed. I think folks didn't realize that 911 was already a law, and they couldn't find it anywhere in the ADA because it was pulled out. But if you look at the House report, at the conference report, paragraph, I think, 67, 68, and why do I remember the paragraph numbers exactly? The page numbers, I should say. It's because my school, Greg may remember this, he was there too, was between 67th and 68th Street in New York City. So when the ADA was passed, I remember contacting the FCC. And I paid for an interpreter to come here with me and I attempted to meet with folks to try to get everything going. Again, I was working with TDI at the time, Telecommunications for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing Incorporated. And I think, FCC at that time felt that they knew what was going on. They had contacts with AT&T. California already had its own relay center operated with AT&T, so they felt that they were kind of okay and didn't need any help from the outside. I offered to help. I experienced resistance from the folks that were here at the time. I remember meeting Alan Mauk of USTA, United States Telephone Association. We agreed to co-sponsor, TDI and USTA, a forum. I think it was on the House side of the Capitol building, one of the subcommittee rooms. 70 folks showed up. They represented industry, consumers, advocates, and so forth. Guess who was the secretary? Yeah, that'd be Karen again. Karen Pelt-Strauss. She was there, furiously taking notes. We collected all of the information. The FCC was there as well. After that particular meeting, a representative from the FCC came up to me and said, hey, yeah, we need help. I'm giving you the 2-minute warning there. Okay. Paul Tyler from Rochester also agreed to come here on loan to the commission for 2 years. He was the president of He was on loan, funded by a gentleman named Bill Castle to come to the FCC for 2 years to work on TRS to get some momentum going for telecommunications relay service. So the two of them came here to the commission. I think it was he and Linda Dubrow, who then went to the TDI convention in 1991, June specifically of 1991. They learned so much that they came back and rewrote the entire order that they had been working on during that time period. And it was July 26, 1991, 1 month later, that order went out. Reed Hunt was the chair of the commission at the time. He came to the TDI convention that summer. And after the convention, he approached me and said, hey, this is exactly what the FCC was supposed to do. The FCC had been working only with industry. And this is really the first time that the FCC had worked directly with consumers. And it was just not what they're, quote, supposed to have been doing. However, the end result created I don't know what you want to call it, but at the time it was called the Disability Task Force. You now know it as the Disability Rights Office at the time. Linda became the chair of that task force for a bit, and before it became the Disability Rights Office that it is today, that Greg is now the chair of. One quick quote as I end. Helen Keller said that the difference between blindness and deafness is that blindness separates people from things. Deafness separates people from people. With what's happening today, all of the revisions and the changes and the improvements coming from the FCC as well as deaf attorneys. We have attorneys here. We have closed captioning on the screen. I have a video phone down the hall. There's access all over this building. So I think that the FCC is making that connection between hearing folks and deaf folks. There's no more separation. Thank you to the Commission for making huge changes in our lives. Thank you. And thank you.
Thank you, Al. What a wealth of information and history showing the whole chain of events from the ADA to today. Really a great way to kick off this panel, right? Now, following the order in our agenda, I will turn it over to Claude Stout. Claude, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Claude Stout. I'm the Executive Director of Telecommunications for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing, TDI. I took over from Al back in 1997. So, wow, I've been here, 19 out of the 25 years of the ADA. So again, as everyone has said, I applaud the Commission for holding this summit. Thank you very much. Hands a-waving. Thank you to Karen as well as to the other folks who work here at the Commission for getting this organized. I was asked to review with you both the public and personal, if you will, communication devices that we may use pre-ADA and post-ADA. So as well as pre-CVAA and post-CVAA. Are you okay with me so far? Yes, okay. Before the Americans with Disabilities Act, deaf and hard of hearing individuals, whether they knew sign language or didn't know sign language, used TTYs. There was no hearing aid compatible telephones. If you wanted to use the telephone and you had trouble on the telephone, you had to use a TTY. Now, keep in mind, they were wonderful at the time, but man, they were big, heavy pieces of equipment. Looked like an old old mailbox, the big old-fashioned blue mailboxes. They were about that size. And government agencies, private businesses would purchase TTYs so that those of us at home who had those clunking machines could talk to them. So everyone had to have one of those, that separate device with a separate telephone number to be able to talk to each other. Or if they had the same phone number, when Identa-Ring concept came onto the scene, they'd have a special ring for their TTY and a special ring for their regular house phone. That was pre-ADA. Many of us also, pre-ADA, used what was called volunteer relay services. There was no 24-hour, 7-day-a-week relay service. What if there was a relay center anywhere around us? They had very, very short hours of availability. And the agents, they didn't do a really good job. They were really not professional on the phone with the people we were talking to. We also had to have a light, some type of a lamp, attached to the TTY to know when a phone call was coming in. The light would flash in lieu of a phone ringing. We also used fax machines like they were going out of style because we faxed everybody. And I know everyone can't imagine the world before the internet, but in 1990, there really was no internet. And so we used some very, very basic IBM PCs. I remember a Macintosh 512. I remember the 5K, the very slimline ones that came out. Those were revolutionary, but those were only in offices and so forth to maintain files and budgets. And I mean, people didn't use it for personal use. There was no concept of email. Now, after the passage of the ADA, there are so many good things. Not only thanks to Karen, but to many other individuals and pieces of legislation, including Al. Today, we now have video phones for folks who use sign language. Understanding some folks still choose to use the TTY. That's what meets their needs. We also have captioned telephones. We now enjoy smartphones just like everybody else. iPhones, Androids. For folks who are deafblind, they can use Braille TTYs. We also now don't just depend on that little lamp attached to our TTY to let us know when the phone is ringing. My whole house lights up now when my phone rings. Literally a light in every room, which would freak somebody out. Now sometimes I don't know what's happening. Is somebody ringing my doorbell? Is there a fax coming in? Is the smoke alarm going off? Or is my video phone ringing? All I know is the lights all over the house ring. But they do for all of those things, to be honest with you. Again, I have a flashing doorbell, as I just said. I now can leave messages for anyone, whether they're deaf or hearing, on an answering machine or a similar type of service. Obviously, we now use computers all the time, not just in our work life, but in our personal life. And so it allows me to use email and other forms of telecommunications to communicate with the world. As Lisa will explain, more and more phones now are hearing aid compatible so that she and others can use them. Televisions now have built-in decoder chip technology. We no longer have to have, TV programs that were open captioned. Now they can be closed captions, and the built-in decoder chip lets us watch them. Pre-CVAA, switching gears for a moment, we could not easily contact a 911 center if we didn't have a TTY. We would have to use TTY or what was called voice carryover. We also had very limited TRS relay capability on our smartphones. But now we can use VRS and other forms of relay on our smartphones. So I'm guessing in the next 5 to 6 years, we will have wireless internal location accuracy, as well as outdoor location accuracy for 911 purposes. And number 4, I think, is a special one for some of us. Before the CVAA, you couldn't participate in online games, video games, chat rooms, etc., since many of those games had the chat features were voice activated only. I got it. I'll fix it. Now those voice cues are catchable, if you will, in text. There's so many wonderful things going on out there. We not only now can make TTY calls to 911 centers, we can also text 911 in many locations. And with NG 911, next generation 911, we know the possibilities are endless. The feature is so promising. I mean, right now we can enjoy Skype and FaceTime, or I'll just video chat, whatever phrase you'd like to use for that, to chat with anyone we want to now. Now, more and more online video games include, whether it be text, caption support, so that deaf and hard of hearing folks don't have to rely only on audio cues in the game. Smartphones now don't even, how do I say, access issues or accessibility issues are built in, if you will, to smartphones. It's not this added thing that folks have to think about it anymore. And now we don't have to worry about, as a deaf or hard of hearing person, which app I would have to download to meet my individual needs, since many, many more of them than before are accessible. I honestly think the future is brighter and brighter the more I think about it. When you talk about just self-driving cars, as you're seeing on the news, who knows what's going to happen in the future? Maybe I'll get to drive less if the car is going to drive for me. And we're looking forward to having captioned radio maybe someday in the future in our cars. All of that is basically in the pipeline, we think, thanks to the CVAA, and thanks again to the FCC's amazing work. Thank you so much for the last 25 years.
Thank you, Claude. And before we move on to our next panelist, Sunny and Claude have mentioned this name a couple times. You may have noticed Karen Peltz-Strauss. So, and Karen would now like to say a few words.
It's just too hard for me not to comment on some of the things that they've said. First, you have to understand that I learned everything that I learned in telecommunications from Sunny, from Al Sonnenstrahl. When I first got to the National Center for Law and the Deaf, which Elaine hired me for. Elaine, if you could stand up. Elaine is now in our Disability Rights Office. We had the honor of hiring her here. But I just have to tell you that when I first arrived, the only TTYs, I want to describe what the TTYs look like if you've never seen them. They were about half the size of this podium. I mean, maybe even a little bit, approximately the size of this podium, just a little bit smaller. They were 200 pounds. They were donated from AT&T and UPI and Western Electric and Western Union because they used this antiquated technology called Bordeaux technology, which no one wanted. And they arrived at TDI, actually the predecessor of TDI, was a distribution committee. They got these devices. They were dirty. They were broken. They were basically useless. And their team took these devices and refurbished them and restored them, actually with assistance from something called the Telephone Pioneers of America, which was a retired persons group from AT&T. And they took these and they put them in 18-wheeler trucks and shipped them all over the country. I mean, we're not talking about the 1800s here. We're talking about the 1960s. And when I first started working at Gallaudet with Elaine, we still used these devices in the 1980s. Okay, again, we're not talking about the 1800s. And when we typed, the keys stuck together. You had to press return at every line, like the old typewriters. You were lucky if you got 60 words per minute. Technically, they could transmit at that, but typically they didn't. If you tried to read one of the messages, more often than not, the words were garbled. And then some of them, the words disappeared over time in the printed out messages. So I'm just trying to paint the picture. And before that, before TTYs, there was nothing. So before the 1960s, when everybody else was enjoying telephone service, the only way to communicate was to get in your car. And so the deaf community, people in the deaf community, if they wanted to make a restaurant reservation, they'd have to drive over and make the reservation, or visit friends. They'd have to get in the car, and they didn't know if those people were available. You couldn't just send an email and say you're going to be there, or call them and say you're going to be there. You had to drive over, and if they weren't there, well, then you were out of luck. And I see Sonny nodding his head. So you guys started a little bit past this period where access was already starting. But I remember when I came into it, that's what was so unbelievable to me as a hearing person, that so many things that we had taken for granted you didn't have even, at first base. And I just wanted to comment on one more thing. Al Sonnenstrom mentioned my efforts at writing this section on 911. It was part of Title II of the Americans with Disabilities Act. We oversee Title IV, which is relay services. Title II requires state and local governments to be accessible, to make their programs accessible. When TDI was unable, when the Congress was unwilling to pass this separate 911 law, the theory that everybody came up with was, well, why don't we just say that as part of the requirement to make state and local government services accessible, they must make their PSAPs, their public safety answering points, their 911 centers accessible. And so that's the legislative history that went in, that one of the interpretations of Title II required that you had to have access through TTYs or other kinds of access to these 911 centers. So just by way of explanation. But I'm sorry, it was so hard to sit there and not stand up and explain this. And I'm sure I'm going to probably do it again, but I'm going to try to control myself. Go ahead.
Thank you, Karen. I appreciate it. It's an important piece of information for us here today. And I know a lot of us want to share our stories here, too. And I'm hoping that after we get through our panel, we'll have an opportunity for some more informal sharing among our different panelists. And one other story that Al mentioned, but he explained my father's role in NAD was serving as a board member of NAD. And he had told me that at that time, when the ADA bill was being drafted, and Justin Dart, who I mentioned earlier, and several others, went to the NAD office to meet with the board to talk through that and decide on priorities, because you can't achieve all the goals, and what you need to do is figure out what your sacrificial lambs are here. What are you willing to give up? But the number one priority was that we wanted to hold on to the relay service from NAD, because communication, as Karen explained, prior to the implementation of the ADA, we were willing to do anything possible to reach out to one another. So if it took a 300-pound monster of a TTY to bring it to your house on a semi-truck, we were going to do it. We were going to do anything we needed to do to communicate with one another. So when Justin Dart asked NAD to prioritize, it was very easy for them to put relay services at the top of their list. Do you remember that, Al?
I do.
I'd like to move on to our next panelist, Eric Bridges. Eric, if you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and share your story.
Sure. Well, good afternoon. I appreciate the invitation to come and talk about the ADA and the CVAA. So I guess I'll just start with how I literally got here today, how I arrived, and what I did before I arrived. I got my phone. I went to a transportation app. I ordered a car. It came. I got in. I looked at probably 6 or 7 emails during my trip here. I responded to, I think, 3 emails on my phone. I also texted my wife, and I texted my dad. I did a Google search. Now, it didn't take me an hour to get here. It took maybe 15 minutes, but I was able to do all of these things with one device, and I was able to do them quickly. I was able to get reliable feedback from the device that I was using. I was able to interact with all these folks, and I was able ultimately to make a dinner reservation for this weekend in Chicago. So we'll just leave that there for now. The CVAA and working on the CVAA was, I realize I'm on the younger side of the folks on this panel, but it will quite easily be one of my career highlights. I'm certain of that. And having the opportunity to work alongside folks like Karen Strauss and Rosaline Crawford and Jennifer Simpson and Mark Reichert, as well as other folks up here at the table, like Lisa Hamlin and Claude Stout and Al Sonnenstrahl, was just fantastic. It was a fantastic learning experience, even though I had worked on the Hill and I had been doing governmental affairs work for several years before. Being part of such a comprehensive piece of legislation and really learning about telecommunications and sort of the next generation of communications and what we as a group, as a community envision being the next generation of communications and how to negotiate with members of Congress on what that meant and how it would be written was truly an amazing experience for me. And all the while we were doing this, I had a $400 phone in my pocket. Could my phone do much, if any, of the activities that I just spoke of earlier? Very few. It could do very few of them reliably, and it costs $400. So there was the cost of the actual device, and then there was the cost of the third-party software. And these devices were, as I said, being used by folks who could see readily at roughly half the cost because they didn't need the software. The phone that I was using had buttons on it, all kinds of buttons on it, as a matter of fact. Right before I came to work at the American Council of the Blind, I worked on Capitol Hill for Congressman John Klein. I was unable to provide him and the rest of the staff with the sort of real-time feedback and information sharing that was necessary because the IT folks did not have a phone that they could provide me. The phone that I had begun to use was not supported by the procurement folks on Capitol Hill. And so it made my life very difficult. There was a lot of challenges, and so I guess the overarching message from me about communications devices and the reliance that we have on them today is that we have come a very long way. There's actual choice now in the marketplace for individuals who are blind or visually impaired to purchase devices that have built-in accessibility, which is fantastic. I think that there still needs to be more choice and better choices. I also think that as we move forward, we cannot forget about those who have low incomes, those who are older. One of the aspects of these devices is that they have a fairly steep learning curve. They're not for everyone, and they're not cheap either. The cost of the device plus the data plan. It would be my hope that the Commission would look at the Lifeline program and ensuring that some devices, some handsets are accessible as part of the Lifeline program in the future, as well as the cell phone carriers not completely getting rid of feature phones. I'd like to recognize Sprint for doing a about as good a job as any of the carriers for maintaining a feature phone as part of an accessible feature phone as part of their line of products. We are a spectrum of people within the blindness community and the visually impaired community. We're not all the same, as I know all of you know. I'm preaching to the choir in here, but there are some of us that need to have the horsepower that a smartphone possesses. There are others of us that do not. And having consumer choice in the marketplace is something that we actively wanted to have be an end result of what came from the CVAA. And I think that we're beginning to see it. And I'm very happy to have been a part of it. I've been very happy to be part of the implementation of the CVAA here at the FCC, and I would very much like to recognize the folks at the Commission who have been actively and diligently implementing various aspects of the CVAA over these last 4 years. The spirit of the law has been, in our opinion, adhered to, and we are very thankful for that. Thank you for inviting me, and I'm happy to participate further down the road.
Thanks, Eric. I think clearly there's a lot more work that needs to be done. There's always work left to do, right? It's not just about technological barriers, but also about availability of technology. I know specifically under the IP transition movement, we have been taking a lot of things under consideration, as well as availability as well as affordability. I know that's, as you mentioned, the Lifeline program, something that's being looked into. So thanks. I'm actually going to move all the way down to the end to Eddie Martinez and hear from Eddie next. He is from the Columbia Lighthouse for the Blind. Let me turn it over to Eddie.
Hello, everyone. I want to first thank the FCC and the Disability Rights Office for inviting me to participate on this panel today. It is an incredible honor to be a member of this illustrious panel. I'm going to give you a brief history of my personal experience. In 1988, specifically the fall of 1988, I was in the Perkins School for the Blind. Prior to 1988, I had no concept of technology that was available to me. I had no idea of what technology looked like. Starting in 1988, one of my professors introduced me to the telebraille. That is a braille accessible TTY device. It was news to me, but being able to communicate by typing and reading in braille was something that my instructor made possible for me through education, and eventually I was able to also use relay service, which was also new to me. Starting in 88, I learned how to use the telebraille, but using relay service, as was earlier mentioned by Claude and others, was very limited. It was not a 24/7 service, and it was very apparent to me that there were some very clear limitations to that service. But that was my only access to telecommunications for a while until the ADA was passed in 1990, and I very clearly remember that being published in the newspaper. At Perkins School, we made sure that we were up on the news at the time. In fall of 1990, the deaf and deaf-blind communities, and in fact the blindness community as well, got together to go to the state of Massachusetts governor's house. There was a protest there about relay service, a rally. And at that rally, we said, "Don't hang up on us." That was our chant. Don't hang up on us. Don't hang up on us. We wanted to force the greater community to listen to us and to change law and policy in order to make sure that relay was more accessible to us. By expanding the hours to relay 24/7, and as a TTY user, I used the TTY until 1995. In 1995, I got my first, actually, I've jumped ahead a little bit to my first internet connection, but I used my Telebraille TTY with the ASCII, A-S-C-I-I, ASCII character set. That was my first experience using a TTY. And I used that TTY to reach out to individuals remotely, and it had a big effect on me. That took me up to 1995, the purchase of my first computer. And I had an AOL account. AOL allowed me to communicate with people through email and AOL Instant Messenger, or AIM. And I used that particular method of communication for a very, very, very long time. Deafblind people and deaf people in the community used Wintel pagers and started to move into wireless technologies, and deafblind individuals did not. You were able to use your wireless device to communicate with people on the go, and we were still stuck with AIM and AOL Instant Messenger and AOL until the CVAA was passed in 2010. We were fighting for equal communications access for the deafblind community, and that is what led to the National Deafblind Equipment Distribution Program, or NDB-EDP. In 2010 to 2012, when that program was initially passed and then implemented, there was a 3-year pilot for that program. I'm trying to get the acronym right, the NDB-EDP, which is also called the ICANN Connect program, or ICC, has been an incredible success at opening doors in my world and the world of others who are deafblind. The Columbia Lighthouse for the Blind administers the equipment distribution program locally here, and through that program, I personally have been able to get accessible equipment like an accessible smartphone with a braille display, and I have continued to learn these new technologies to the point that I have become a trainer, and I am now training other deafblind consumers to communicate with their own equipment with others, and that has really what has opened up the world to me. Now, I look back into the incredibly limited experience that I used to have, starting with the Telebraille all the way through AOL and AOL Instant Messenger up to where I am today. I can tell you I'm incredibly happy to see how far we have come, and I look forward to where we will go in the future with the evolution of technology. Television and Braille, I think, is a place that we can certainly go. Access to movies and TV are important, and I think there are ways that we can bring that together using closed captioning. And that is my story.
Wow. Just wow. Eddie, you did an amazing job. You gave a perfect example of how the CVAA has helped fill in some of the gaps that have been out there, gaps that had been left since the ADA. And I know they're not completely full, but they're at least filling in. I will tell you that just this next weekend, this Friday, Saturday, Sunday, the National Museum of American History, the Smithsonian Museum, will have an exhibit, on the ICANN Connect Equipment Distribution Program. If you want more information, there will be a booth there, I believe. Eddie, I don't know if you're going to be going or not, but out of curiosity, show of hands of anybody in the room, has he mentioned ASCII. Anyone heard of ASCII other than us nerds here in the room? ASCII? I see a few hands. ASCII. It's a communication protocol used specifically for TTYs. So honestly, until he said it, I hadn't thought about it in a while. And AOL Instant Messaging, AIM. Okay, who admits to still using it? I see a couple hands. All right. Thank you. Next, our next storyteller is going to be Lisa Hamlin. Lisa?
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for inviting me as well. It's really an honor, and it's actually lots of fun for me to listen to the history and to listen to everybody's perspective on this. It's really an education, because I'm a latecomer to some of this. My story is that I work now as the Director of Public Policy at Hearing Loss Association of America. And I'm going to focus on caption telephone because that really has changed my life. That's been part of my life. And many of the people that I work with and work for, our members have told me time and again how caption telephones have made it really possible for them to communicate in a way that they couldn't before. Everyone from the grandma who can finally talk to their grandkids and understand what they're saying to the graphic artist who finally is able to take that telephone interview that they couldn't do before without a captioned phone. And for me, it was a big game changer too, because I came to my hearing loss late. I literally woke up one morning after having normal hearing, and I don't know how normal it was, but I had normal hearing. And then the next morning, I'd lost to a severe to profound hearing loss. So I was thrust into a whole new world that I knew nothing about, and this was pre-internet days. So it was to find the information that I needed was a real struggle. But I found that technology was the thing that helped me most. And one of the first things I got was a big old closed captioning device, the decoders. You remember the decoders that went on top of the TVs. That was one of my first devices. So we'll hear more about captioning. But the second thing I got was a TTY. Now, I didn't get one of the monsters you heard described. I haven't seen them. I hope I can see them. I hope they're in the Smithsonian. I'd love to see that. But I got a littler one that hooked onto my telephone, and I used that. But did I love TTYs? Did I love the relay? Not so much. Now, at the time, I didn't understand the brilliance that put the relay services into the ADA. I didn't get it. What I got was I had been a hearing person, and I'd had conversations. I picked up the phone. It was smooth. It was easy. And I lived in New York. It was fast. TTYs are not fast. They're just not. So I'd be typing, and my typing wasn't that. I'd type away, and then it'd be garbled, and then somebody else would try to interrupt me, and it would be garbled, and it was not my favorite way to communicate. So at that point, I almost gave up on TTYs. What I did was, even though the phones weren't compelled to be hearing aid compatible, I don't know if you remember the old dial, clunky Ma Bell phones, actually had a way to interconnect with my telecoil, so I could almost hear on it with boosting it with an amplified phone. I could almost hear on that, but I didn't get word for word. It was conversations were always, well, what did you say? Can you say that again? So it was almost as slow as a TTY, but not quite. But then, on July 25th in 2003, which is 12 years ago, almost to this day, the FCC approved caption telephones as a form of enhanced voice carryover phone that was eligible for reimbursement from the Interstate TRS Fund. So it wasn't long after that I got my first caption telephone call. Now, this was a friend who called me. It wasn't my own phone. They called me up, and I had been used to this person calling me on TTY. All of a sudden, I could hear his voice. I was like, wow, what's going on? How come I can hear your voice? How come this conversation is so smooth? You're talking through relay. This is smooth. This is easy. And I can pretty much hear you, and he could tell what I was saying, too. No longer do we have to have a caller assistant in the middle. No, it was an easy way to communicate. Well, was it perfect? Well, not really. I went out and I got my first analog caption telephone. And what that was, and back in the day, was you had one line. So when I was calling out, I could have captions appear on my phone. I could dial directly. I didn't have to call relay. I could dial directly, and I got the captions. But if somebody wanted to call me, they couldn't get relay they had to call relay first and then me. And say, you know what, that didn't happen so much. Even my family would not remember to do it. So again, I was struggling on the phone. So times have changed. Okay, now we have the Internet Protocol Caption Phone Services, the IPCTS. Now it's easy for everybody. It's not just easy for me, it's easy for the people calling me. I can get the captions all the time, whether in or out. They're easy to get a hold of. As long as you're eligible, you can get a caption phone, and you can, for the first time, much more smoothly, such to the extent that I rarely get calls now from people who say, I have trouble, I can't communicate on the phone. Well, maybe more with the smartphones, which aren't quite, in my mind, not quite so smart if I can't hear on them, but that's a different story. The IPCTS has made my life. The other thing that it did is I now have one. I'm hugely dependent on it. I have one at home and I have one at work. And that has made work life so much easier for me. Phone calls are still not my favorite way to communicate. I much prefer text or email. But I know now if somebody calls me cold on the phone at work, at least I have a shot at understanding what's going on. And what we want to do, too, I think one of the things in looking at the 25th anniversary as we see these huge changes in technology and we look forward to even more. I think we should look forward to having things even bigger and better, because one of the things that's still true for caption phones, they're wonderful and the hardware keeps getting better and the push button and they look sleeker and they're very cool. But the voice recognition still isn't where it should be. The delay on the phones still is much too far. I had a conversation the other day where I couldn't keep up with the conversation. People were running ahead, and the delay was such that I couldn't get it. So we want to see more, and we want to see better, and we've come a long way in 25 years, and we hope to see not only that, but we hope to see voice recognition. We hope to see HD voice better so that everybody can hear, and we hope to see video and captioning so that we can have the best that we possibly can. And I look forward to seeing telecommunications doing ever better and the next time we celebrate the anniversary of the ADA. So thank you for having me.
Perfect timing, Lisa, and thank you for all of you who have presented so far. And now we're lucky to have Commissioner Jessica Rosenworcel, who has been a staunch supporter of accessibility both inside and outside the Commission. I'm sure that you're going to enjoy what she has to say.
Thank you so much, Karen, and thank you so much for what you do for these issues. So we're here today to celebrate two phenomenal pieces of legislation. First, it's been 25 years, a quarter of a century, since the Americans with Disabilities Act passed into law. Now, on signing, President George H.W. Bush famously said, "Let the shameful walls of exclusion finally come tumbling down." That is so well put. Because as everybody in this room knows, that law laid the foundation for the meaningful inclusion of 54 million Americans with disabilities in our modern civic and economic life. Second, it has been 5 years, can't believe it, since passage of the 21st Century Communications and Video Accessibility Act. So I know this law pretty well. I worked a little bit on this legislation because I helped shepherd it through the Congress in my last job. So when it was all done, I had the privilege of joining the President at the White House when it was signed into law. And I know that just as 25 years ago, the Americans with Disabilities Act tore down walls, this new law pried open doors of opportunity, but for the Internet era. Now, I will never forget this signing ceremony because it was the culmination of so much work, the excitement of all the opportunities ahead, and the way the White House photographer captured this historic event You see, when it was all done, I was sent a photograph. And it was a picture of the event with Stevie Wonder standing next to my boss at the time, Senator Jay Rockefeller. And to put it mildly, these were not people that I ever imagined would be side by side. If you don't know, Senator Rockefeller is a Baroque music fan and a Bach aficionado. Stevie Wonder, of course, is a master of rhythm and blues. He's a musical legend, but I think it's fair to say he does not have much in common with Johann Sebastian Bach. But this effort, it brought them together. This cause made these two unlikely people comrades. Because this odd couple, in their own way, fought for this law, fought for passage, and fought to expand access to communications and media technology. But if you really want to sum up the value of this law, with apologies to my former boss, I think Stevie Wonder beats Bach. Because in Sir Duke, which is one of my favorite songs, Stevie Wonder makes a beautiful statement about equity and access. Now, if I could sing it here, I would, but all the musical ability in my family went to my brother. So I am going to spare you my vocal musings and just quote for you the lyrics. Music is a world within itself, with a language we all understand, with equal opportunity for all to sing, dance, and clap hands. I think of those lyrics as a call for equal opportunity. And I think that's a call that Congress first answered with the Americans for Disabilities Act, and then later took up with the 21st Century Communications and Video Accessibility Act. So I'm proud of my work on this effort. Bid as it was, I have a copy of the law signed by former Senator Pryor on the wall just next to my office. And anybody who's sitting here who wants to come up and see it, please do. We'll make way. But I'm actually even prouder still of the work that this commission has done on that law, with captioning, video description, caption telephone service, relay services, texting, and so much more. But I'm actually most proud of the people, some of whom are sitting here today, who fought so hard for so many years for adoption of these laws and inspire us to use them to continue to pry open the doors of opportunity for all. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Before you leave, you may want to stop at the back. We are having cake later, which you can come back for, but in the meantime, you can grab one of the chocolates, or two, you're allowed, which actually I made, and this is a little preview for all of you. They say, this is my downtime. I try. If it's up to all of you here, I don't actually, but it's my relaxation, and they say happy anniversary in 25 years. So if you want to stop at the corner before you exit, sure. Thank you so much for your very inspiring remarks. And now we are very lucky to have Commissioner Minion Clyburn, who is also an incredible supporter of these issues. You all know that she has been in the forefront of ensuring that people that have been traditionally unrepresented or underrepresented have a voice here at the Commission. So without further ado, we welcome Commissioner Clyburn.
Good afternoon again, everyone. Thank you so much, Karen, for all of your support, your friendship, and for being a true champion. All of you know how committed and dedicated Karen is to what the day and the week represents. And I want to thank you once again for, again, always staying focused and forever reminding us why we're here. This Sunday, as you know, marks the 25th anniversary of the Americans with Disability Act. And as we head into the 5th year of the Communications and Video Accessibility Act, we should take pride in proclaiming that millions of lives have been improved for the better, that we have been instrumental in bridging digital divides, and that our policies are enabling Americans living with disabilities the ability to communicate on par with their peers. Many of us take rulings and things like this for granted. But allow me to take a quick look back at what life looked like in 1990, before those smartphones and viral videos we sometimes enjoy. Our home phones were tethered to the walls. Car phones were making their debut. Computers were big and bulky, and most people thought that the World Wide Web was some sort of horror movie. But for individuals with disabilities, the options for communicating were limited, clunky, far from equivalent, and in too many places, horrible. Those with disabilities attempting to communicate via home phones, pay phones, pagers, fax machines, and the early versions of emails too often found that being connected was nearly impossible, difficult, of course, because there was no requirement for access. Fortunately, the ADA changed that. And not only did it require persons with disabilities to not be discriminated against, but has enabled and will continue to enable giving those with disabilities equal opportunities in employment and access. In the FCC's portfolio, the ADA mandates this agency to provide methods of communications that are functionally equivalent to the ability of an individual who does not have a hearing or speech impairment. The landscape has evolved much since then, I'm happy to say, and so has the needs for persons with disabilities when it comes to access to advanced telecommunications services. As communications and technologies evolve, so too is what is defined as access and functional equivalence. Recognizing this, Congress enacted the 21st Century Communications and Video Accessibility Act in 2010, which explicitly directs this agency to provide access to advanced communication services and products for people with disabilities. So while we celebrate the significance and accomplishments that we've made over the past quarter of a century, we recognize that more work needs to be done. We commit to you, I commit to you, that we will not rest on our laurels, that we will continue to listen, and that we will keep advocating for better and improved access for persons with disabilities. I especially want to thank today the Consumer and Government Affairs Bureau, especially the Disabilities Rights Office, for their unwavering dedication to break down communications barriers and build bridges in order to get rid of all of the existing divides for persons with disabilities. And while time and technology will change, it will continue to change. This agency's, my individual commitment to you, the commitment for equal access, will never, ever, ever change. I thank you very much for your support, and I thank you very much for giving us the impetus and the motivation needed for us to continue to close any existing divide. Thank you very much.
And for those of you who just listened to these two presentations, you can see why it is so wonderful working here. With the support that we get, it makes every day both a blessing and a challenge to do more for the people that, for all of you and for the rest of the community that requires accessibility. The chairman is about to come down, so rather than begin with a new testimonial, perhaps we should just, if you could just sit in your seats. I hate to have people leave, or I can just keep talking, which is another possibility. In fact, actually, well, yeah,
Greg, I actually have one more option
good.
for you.
And I was going to just mention something about you two. So, Greg, you go first, and then I'll go. And we'll just keep talking.
Oh, you want to talk about me?
No.
Okay.
I was just going to talk about
okay.
you.
No, I was just going to say I'm sorry. I was going to follow up on something that Lisa mentioned. Lisa had in her remarks mentioned caption telephone service, and I made a note to myself that back in 1990, when the ADA was passed, at the time there were basically two ways to communicate, to reach out, if you will. And as I mentioned, the National Association for the Deaf at that time had put a strong emphasis on relay services as a priority, even over television closed captioning, as far as the ADA was concerned, because at that time, even now, folks were desperate to talk to each other. I don't think that's ever changed in our society, and relay was one way to allow for that type of communication. However, so that, again, was like 1990, and we had basically two ways to talk on, to communicate. Talk on the phone, make a phone call, meaning not in-person communication, or send a letter. Today, making notes to myself, we can make phone calls or receive phone calls, emails, internet messaging, text messaging, short messaging or SMS, video chats, or we still have snail mail. That is still around. So my point is there are so many different ways to communicate now, and I believe that's even changed. Our behavior has changed because of it. Relay service is now not the only solution. It's now an option. It is a solution, not the solution, because now there are so many other solutions out there, including direct video contact. The FCC, as you know, has an ASL consumer support line. I know we've advertised it. Other agencies are starting to adopt a similar concept, direct video access for folks. And so I just wanted to throw that out there. There's so many options now since technology has changed. I think it's to everybody's benefit, to be honest.
So I had a couple of things I wanted to mention. First of all, I want to emphasize Greg's role in the passage of the ADA. He was the student president at Gallaudet at the time, and was one of four main student leaders who spearheaded the protest against Gallaudet's choosing a hearing president, and the consequence were major protests that lasted approximately a week. Again, Elaine and I were there. We were at the National Center for Law and Deafness, and it was a lot of fun. It took us back to the 70s, the protests of the 70s, and every day we would arrive on campus, and there would be these massive protests. But the protests actually expanded way past Gallaudet. They were actually nationwide, and press all over the world covered it. So it was before the Deaf President Now movement. When I would tell my friends that I worked at Gallaudet, they would say, "What?" They had no idea what a sign language interpreter was. They had no idea what closed captioning was. And almost overnight, it became common parlance. It was in the Times, New York Times. It was in the Post. It was on World News. I'm saying it wrong. ABC. What was it, Greg? It was ABC World News Tonight.
Right, World News Tonight.
World News
yes,
Tonight.
And Nightline.
Greg was Nightline. That's what it was. Nightline. Greg was interviewed. So he was actually quite famous, and because of that, because there was so much attention brought to these issues, not only the ADA but several other laws got passed. The Hearing Aid Compatibility Act of 1988 got passed, and then eventually the Television Decoder Circuitry Act got passed in 1990. I'm sorry, the Hearing Aid, yes, that's right, the Hearing Aid Compatibility Act of 1988 got passed, requiring phones to have hearing aid compatibility. There was a federal relay law that got passed, and then the ADA, and then the Television Decoder Circuitry Act. The Television Circuitry Act is the reason that we all have closed captions in our televisions. There's a little chip built into it. and that was required by that law. So it was truly a snowball of events, but very much spearheaded by the world focusing on Gallaudet during that, I think it was 4 days, Greg, is that right?
It was 7 days.
7 days,
actually.
okay. Well, it was quite an amazing time. I also wanted to mention, Greg mentioned that the Smithsonian is having an exhibit, and I was going to tell you about it at the end, but I can tell you about it now. For those of you who are around on Friday and Saturday and Sunday at the National Museum of American History, they have a new terrace, and there is going to be tents on it. And we have, we're joining various other federal agencies in exhibiting various different types of technologies, especially technologies in our I Can Connect program for people who are deafblind. FEMA is joining us in showing technologies on ways that people with disabilities communicate in an emergency. We're also showing some new technologies from Comcast that enable a person who is blind or visually impaired to have audio output from their set-top boxes and can talk into their remotes to be able to select programming and record programming and choose channels. And let's see, and then there's and then relay services. So those 4 types of technology is going to be shown every day starting Friday, Saturday, and Sunday from 12 to 6. In addition, I don't know whether some of you, I think, have attended. It's still going on. The Kennedy Center every night on the Millennium Stage has been celebrating the arts by people with disabilities. So each night there have been different events that are shown, that are performances by people with disabilities, and they also have a lot of art in their lobby that's drawn and created by people with disabilities. So this is a major celebration really across town. The chairman is not here, and believe it or not, I'm running out of things to say. Oh, no, wait, I have one more. Okay, I have... Yeah.
There's one more thing that
Yes,
I
go
would
ahead.
like to mention briefly, if I can, along those same lines. And everything ultimately is connected because my role was mentioned in the Deaf President Now movement as well as the ADA, because I was on the Hill to testify in favor of the Americans with Disabilities Act when the bill was being introduced. And in my opening remarks, I emphasized the importance of having relay service, because relay service would effectively tear down the Berlin Wall. And then, sure enough, that next month, the Berlin Wall, the factual Berlin Wall, came tumbling down. And so I guess I gave Reagan the idea. I don't know.
One small thing, I believe also that the impact that the Deaf President Now movement had. I remember prior to the Deaf President Now, often termed DPN, I was walking down the street. A stranger came up to me, tried to talk to me, and I pointed that I was deaf, and the person said, "Oh, excuse me," and walked away. After DPN, when a stranger approached me and tried to talk with me, and I explained that I was deaf, they said, "Oh," and then they stayed and tried to mouth the words very clearly for me to understand. My point is that hearing folks in general, I think, gained respect for people who were deaf. After the Deaf President Now movement, I think folks realized that, wow, we really do things. Deaf people do things other than hear. And so I think it really had a huge, huge impact on the hearing community as well, not just deaf folks.
I'm just told that the chairman is on his way down, so he should be here momentarily. I did want to mention that we have a disability advisory committee now, as many of you know, and you can consider this the first part of the celebration, and we are going to finish the celebration on October 8th at our next disability advisory committee, because that will actually be the date 5 years later that the CVAA was signed. So if you want to come back, I can't guarantee more chocolates. I have to find 5-year little buttons instead of 25 years. But we will probably have some celebration as well here. We had a comment over there. Did you want to mention something, Sylvie?
Yes.
Go ahead.
In relation to the Thank you. In relation to the ADA celebration on the mall this weekend, and I've never been told to speak louder before. Oh, stand up. Okay. In relation to the celebration on the mall this weekend, there will be audio describers and sign language interpreters from 12 to 5 each day, and the Smithsonian Museum will have audio described tours at 1 o'clock on Friday and Sunday.
Anybody else have any comments? Oh, he's here. This is good timing. Ah, perfect. Saved by the bell. Saved by the bell. We were just killing time. No, it's good. People, look, there's a lot of people here. They're very happy to see you. And now, of course, we've said wonderful things about him over and over again. As you know, he is beyond supportive of these issues. We welcome Chairman Tom Wheeler to celebrate with us right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen, and thank you, first of all, to all the panelists who are here participating in this today, and to the advocates who are here. Hooray for advocates and advocacy, and thank you for what you do. But I really also want to say thank you to Karen, thank you to Greg, thank you to so many of the FCC staff who in so many ways personify the spirit of the ADA and the CVAA. I was down at the White House last week for the celebration there, saw Karen and Greg, but it was there that I learned that Karen was highly instrumental in some of the language that ended up becoming the ADA. And you know, when you go to meet your maker, and St. Peter meets you at the gate and says, okay, what'd you do down there that's worthwhile? I had a role in the creation of the Americans with Disabilities Act. It's guaranteed entrance. and is something worth celebrating and for which we should be grateful. But it's not that Karen is unique here. There are so many folks at this agency who have picked up on the responsibility, not just the statutory responsibility, but the broader responsibility relative to ADA and CVAA. You know, the whole disabilities office here, the work that Allison, our new bureau chief, has been doing to get working with Greg and Karen and others in her new bureau, the work that the media bureau has done on closed captioning and on video captioning on the internet and video description now, the work that the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau has done to make 911 accessible from text. I think one of the great experiences I've had at this agency was the day that Claude brought some folks in to meet with me on text to 911. And I heard some of the stories about the difference it makes in the experience that some people have had. I'll never forget them. But, you know, again, you go on, our wireless bureau is working on access for mobile devices, making sure that that is a first thought, not an afterthought when people start designing mobile devices. The Office of Managing Director and the General Counsel and the work that John Chambers and his group had been doing on TRS and what's going on there. I guess what I'm trying to say is that this is an agency that has so many people that are believers in the kinds of concepts embodied in the ADA and the CVAA. And I also want to give a special shout out to somebody I don't know how many of you have met, Mindy Ginsburg, in the Office of Managing Director. And Mindy has taken on her project that this agency is going to hire individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Because there are two components to the kinds of concepts that are in the ADA. One is access. One is ability to use networks. And the other is the opportunity to find a job. And we want to make sure that this agency is in the forefront of making sure that we are not only the opportunities represented by connectedness, but the opportunities represented by employment. And then secondly, we want to see that we are the agency that we want to see that we are the agency that exports those ideas. Thanks to Greg, we've had a lot of leadership. We're the first agency in the government to use broadband video for ASL. So people could call in and sign with somebody here at the FCC. And we have been evangelizing with other federal agencies and with the administration to say, hey, this ought to be what's going on in every federal agency. And God bless Administrator Maria Contreras-Sweet at the SBA stepped up and is using video at the SBA. There are other federal agencies that are talking to us about how do they learn from our experience and come online. You know, it's amazing. The Social Security Administration, we know because we pay the tab for the TRS, right? So Social Security Administration receives about 3 million minutes a year of TRS calls. The Social Security Administration ought to have the capability in place where people can sign directly with them using this amazing thing called broadband and IP video. And we're working with them to get to that point. And it ought to be true for the other federal agencies who we know are the recipients of TRS minutes. So one thing we're doing is we're trying to export the models that we've built here for communications capability, and we're trying to export the models that Mindy Ginsburg is building in terms of making sure that our workforce is diverse and open. We talk a lot about open networks and the power of open networks. We need to make sure that we've got open opportunities as well. And we want to be the leaders in the federal government on that and help other agencies see opportunities there too. But, as Claude knows, my favorite sign is that this is only the beginning. And so one of the things that really excites me is the work that John Chambers and members of Karen and Greg's teams have been working on to build another example of leadership that we can then export to others, and that is a platform that will use the power of the web to allow anyone with an idea to be able to build an application that will help attack a challenge experienced by an individual with a disability. I keep saying what we're doing is we're applying new technology to old challenges. And this platform, which will start by providing video access, we have already, well, the important thing about it is that we will build this common platform so that people who have new ideas about access opportunities, access applications or technologies for individuals can build on that and not have to go back and replicate it. And we've already seen some really exciting examples of what it can do in terms of new applications for individuals who are deaf or hard of hearing. We saw a really interesting application of how it can be used for a new application for individuals who are blind or sight impaired. And I just think that it is monumentally exciting that what this agency is doing is creating and by the way, it's going to be debuted at Claude's annual meeting next month in Baltimore. I just think it's terribly exciting that what this agency is doing is building this common platform that anybody with an idea. I was a venture capitalist before I came here. You know, and the joke about venture capitalists is that they fund two guys and a dog in a garage, but they have an idea. And I think that two guys and a dog anywhere in the world that has an idea about how I can build an app that will attack the kinds of challenges that the ADA identified we ought to be attacking, that building a platform for that is a pretty exciting thing. And so I'm awful proud of what this agency is doing with that, and I look forward to the TDI meeting next month, and I think we'll have some interesting announcements as to folks who are actually going to be using this. But I'm wandering on. I'm proud to be the head of this agency. I am especially proud to be the head of this agency at a time like we are living through now, when the opportunities represented by new networks and new technology can be harnessed to address so many different things in life as well as the economy. And I am proudest of the fact that this agency is stepping up and will continue to step up under the leadership of people like Allison and Karen and Greg and John Chambers. to make sure that we're harnessing that technology for the opportunities that it presents for everyone. So thanks you all for being here. Hooray, happy birthday, ADA. Oh, good, yes.
I mentioned before that this agency has been for quite some time, but especially under your tenure, at the forefront of eliminating communications barriers. And we have recently been recognized by the City University of New York for our vigilance and leadership in increasing the accessibility of communication services and technologies for persons with disabilities. The award honors the Federal Communications Commission with the ADA 25 Lights Camera Access Award. Lights Camera Access is an effort to have people with disabilities both be able to access the media and be represented in the media. And so I present to you and to all of the bureaus that have worked so diligently on these issues this award on behalf of the City University of New York.
Thank you. This is... And I accept it on behalf of everybody in this great team who believes in what this award stands for, starting with a certain unnamed party.
Thank you. And
Okay. Thank you so much. And now, if you could direct your attention back to our panel after those outstanding remarks by our three leaders here at the Commission. Next, we're going to turn it over to Ms. Rebecca Ledoux. She is going to share her experience, personal and professional, with ADA and access.
Hello, I'm Rebecca Ledoux. I'm here representing the speech-disabled community. It's a pleasure to be here, and I thank you. Here we're celebrating the 25th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act via the FCC, which is how the Commission made it possible for people who are deaf, hard of hearing, visually impaired, deaf and blind, as well as people who have speech disabilities, to communicate over the phone and the Internet, as well as making E911 calls for emergencies. And there are other contributions that the ADA is involved with, making lives easier for all people with disabilities. Three words come to mind as we celebrate the ADA 25th anniversary: pride, power, and promise. Pride. When I received my first TTY, I was proud that I was able to do my own communicating by myself over the telephone without having someone else do my calling. Power. The ability and freedom to communicate with others, whether spoken or written, is something most take for granted. When most people go to speak, they expect a clear voice to come out. Whether talking to a coworker, reading to one's grandchildren, or reminiscing with an old friend, most people take their voice for granted. But for those with speech disabilities, a reliable voice is no longer guaranteed. The sound that comes out may not accurately represent the feelings of the speaker. People with communication disabilities were not able to communicate outside of their world until telecommunications relay services came along and made the use of the telephone possible for them. Now, they can take care of routine matters such as making doctor's appointments, making business calls, calling friends and relatives, etc. Telecommunications relay services has made even calling 911 for emergency situations possible for persons with speech disabilities. Two relay services that people with speech disabilities can utilize are speech-to-speech, STS, relay, and hearing carry-over, HCO, relay. With STS relay, you can use your voice and hear at the same time, but have a communication agent revoice what you say verbatim, like real-time telephoning. For HCO relay, your voice is not heard, but you can hear the party you are calling and you type back to the communication agent what you want to tell the other party. A TTY and a speakerphone are used for this type of relay service. People with speech disabilities have two things against them when speaking: having trouble speaking and being understood. Therefore, it is with much hesitation that speech-disabled individuals use the telephone. There are many varieties of speech disabilities, and many speech-disabled individuals have other disabilities as well, and some use wheelchairs. Some speech-disabled individuals do not have the cognitive or manual skills to use a telephone or a computer keyboard. For those who lack the manual skills, a pointer or stick is used to strike a key on a computer keyboard. This same method is also used to dial a number on a telephone. Also, a switch is used to manipulate signals on a computer screen. Most people with speech disabilities use a variety of adaptive equipment for communication. These adaptive equipments are called augmentative communication devices. Some are more sophisticated than others. On these devices, you can program sentences or even a whole presentation or speech. With a click of your key, your speech is communicated to you. You can connect this particular device to a cell phone for a direct call using certain programmable keys for certain conversations. For example, "Hey, how are you?" Users of this equipment often call through speech-to-speech relay so that the communications assistant can manage the call and ensure that the other callers understand and respect the turn-taking process. Promise. The 21st Century Communications and Video Accessibility Act updates federal communications law to increase the access of persons with disabilities to modern communications. The Commission is committed to fulfilling their obligation to ensure that the rules provide for people who rely on captions with full video programming access in accordance with congressional intent. At the February 2014 Commission meeting, the Commission adopted standards to ensure high closed captioning quality so that all Americans, especially those with hearing or other disabilities, have the same access to news, public affairs, sports, and entertainment on television programming as everyone else. FCC action in this area is long overdue, and continued progress on these issues will remain high on the agenda.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Rebecca. The next speaker we have this afternoon is Mark Reichert. And Mark is from the American Foundation for the Blind.
Good afternoon. It sounds like this microphone is yet to work, but hopefully you all can hear me. Really a pleasure to be here on the 25th anniversary of the ADA and on the 5th anniversary of a law which I don't think it's any exaggeration to say is the most comprehensive and indeed the most important disability policy to be passed, to be enacted by the U.S. Congress since the ADA. It's a real pleasure to be here. I'll just offer a quick testimonial from me, and then I want to get to some other remarks. But let me just say what a cruel joke it is to have to do a presentation like this after the chair and two commissioners. And also, I'm standing in the way among the other remaining panelists between you and your cake. So it's this is bad news. So please pray for me. I'd appreciate it. My only testimony is that for many years in my apartment, I have had a very nice television. It's sat there. I'm not even entirely sure that I had it plugged in, actually. And now I'm spending far too much money on Comcast services, which are great. And a little shout out to Comcast there. They're doing a fantastic job. An accessible set-top box with voice output for being able to navigate the channels of the television. And can I just say that, God, there's a lot of bad television on. It's really quite remarkable. So that's progress. Being able to know, like everybody else, about how you have 600 channels and only 3 do you want to watch. That's not entirely true. But it really is about equality. And I will also say that video description has really made a difference for a lot of us. And, wow, talk about how things change and evolve. This commission, once upon a time, tried to make video description available, and there were a lot of folks who said, no, thank you. We even had some grumpy old men in our own community who said, no, we don't want any part of this. And funny thing, some of those people have had a Damascus Road conversion, and now everybody loves video description, and that's an incredible thing, and that's great to see, too. So things absolutely do change over the course of time. If you wait long enough, things can actually turn around, and it's fantastic. Let me say to you that, a lot of my panelists have talked about some of the incredible things that the CVAA has done, and let me try to connect the dots for you, if it's not painfully obvious already, between the CVAA and that larger law that we also celebrate this year, namely the ADA. So the CVAA has made it clear that communications technologies, the cool new communications technologies, and video programming gizmos, that's the technical legal term, I understand, gizmo, are more and more accessible to people with disabilities, and that's great. But in this day and age, all of these devices, they're not operating in a vacuum. I mean, how do you tell the difference anymore between your phone, a television? Do you know even if you happen to be on the internet or not? The reality of it is all of these devices are connected, and the distinctions between them are blurring. Well, we have a situation today where devices that we are seeing more and more become accessible to people with disabilities, thanks in large measure to the CVAA, are connecting to the internet, and yet when you make that connection, you can't do what it is that you're expected to do or that you want to do once you get there. So we have an absurd situation in a lot of cases where a mobile phone, which is explicitly required to have a web browser that's accessible on it, can be used to connect to, for example, a public accommodation, a place of exhibition, like perhaps a online movie theater, for example, something like that, purely hypothetically speaking, of course. And you get to that website, and lo and behold, that website's inaccessible. And we've been working for a very, very long time, and, we're all advocates up here, so you should expect a little advocacy on a panel like this, okay? And since this is a public forum, we want to renew our call to the U.S. Department of Justice to get moving on its ADA regulations. They've been sitting on those regulations for a very long time, and in fact, it's ironic, if not sad, that the DOJ had someone go to Congress, actually in 2010, just a couple of months before the CVAA became the law, and promise that they were going to be moving on a whole host of regulations. And I submit that if an agency like the Federal Communications Commission can essentially affect a revolution in regulations based on a law like the CVAA over the course of this 5 years, there is absolutely no excuse for the U.S. Department of Justice to not have moved on their regulations with respect to making sure that public accommodations under the ADA that are operating, particularly online-only public accommodations, need to be more accessible. That absolutely needs to happen, and there's no better way to honor the last 25 years of the ADA and certainly the 5 years of the CVAA that we've had to make sure that we don't have a patchwork quilt of accessibility. That when we talk about the kinds of things we've been talking about up here, that we don't think about hearing aid compatibility or video description or any of these other things as little bits and pieces that aren't all part of one whole. They absolutely are, and we can't talk about public policy in one federal agency without thinking about how it relates to another. Okay, I'll get off my soapbox now. Thank you all very much, and it's really an honor to be here.
That's so great. Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Mark. Obviously, we need to work together with our sister agencies out there, so thanks for your remarks. We're going to move to a new face from the National Association for the Deaf. Zainab Al-Kepsi. Looking forward to your remarks. The floor is yours.
Hello, and this is actually my second week on the job here, so I want to thank the FCC for the invitation to join you this afternoon. It's an enormous honor. I was asked to focus on two particular items, TV captioning and internet captioning, in my remarks today. I'll start out with TV captioning. I will also say I am one of the younger people on the panel here today, and I'm really very fortunate to have grown up in a time when I have had access to quality captioning on television. There was a time when there was no captioning on television. It wasn't until the 1996 Act that captioning was actually required on broadcast television, and now almost everything on television is captioned, more than any other country in the world, which is incredible. So as we celebrate the 25th anniversary of the ADA, there are a lot of celebrations going on, but we also want to recognize some areas where we can improve and work together to continue to increase accessibility. And I'm going to touch briefly on that with regards to captioning. It's always been an interesting experience for me, either hit or miss, and I'm going to focus on the hits here rather than the misses for a moment. For example, I can recall some of those watershed moments when the whole country was watching. For example, the announcement that bin Laden had been killed, the Boston Marathon bomber, and the manhunt subsequent to the bombing. I was able to watch those national moments alongside my hearing friends and the hearing community because I had access to captions. Some television stations do a wonderful job of providing quality live captioning, whereas others are still trying to catch up to speed. We are still working together to try to continue to improve the quality of live captions. The National Association of the Deaf very much appreciates the Commissioner's 5-0 vote in support of new captioning quality standards. It means a lot to the deaf and hard of hearing community because equal access means accurate, complete, synchronous, positioned captions. I look forward to working collaboratively with the FCC and members of industry and other consumer groups to raise the bar until we have achieved 100% quality captioning on television. Now I want to shift to talking about internet captioning. The CVAA set the standard for online access to captioned material, only requiring programs that had been previously captioned on television and then subsequently shown on the internet, but also requiring that video playback equipment be able to show such captions. Now I have the ability to enjoy captioning content on my iPad, my smartphone, my laptop, among other devices. We are also very, very excited that video clips are soon to be covered, thanks to the FCC's reversal on their decision on that issue, and we are looking forward to having access to video clips that heretofore have not been captioned, which is an incredible advance. With the passage of the CVAA and its implementation, deaf and hard of hearing individuals have had access to a wealth of captioned content. The sheer volume of online captioned video has been incredible, even though at the time when this was passed, there was only a limited amount of content that had been on TV first and then shown on the internet. So the volume started out small, but it has made an incredible impact. The CVAA made it easy for the NAD to pursue some other areas that have not been covered either. Now I want to share with you a quick personal story. I am the only deaf person in my hearing family. My family was very, very excited to make use of Netflix. It was such an amazing concept for them to get together for family time and watch Netflix. And we encountered this problem because Netflix content was by and large not captioned. And my family made the decision, out of consideration to me as a deaf member of the family, that we wouldn't use Netflix. I knew, however, that they were still going to use it when I wasn't around. I felt then that when I was there, I was holding them back from enjoying this Netflix service, even though this is something that was not my fault. And I shared my feelings with my family and explained the emotional decision involved in this. And he said, that's right, but we need to remain united on this issue. And they decided to boycott Netflix and not use it at all, so that we as a family were together on this issue. After the NAD lawsuit to Netflix, and Netflix that the lawsuit survived their motion to dismiss from Netflix, and now we find that over 90% of Netflix content has been captioned. And every night, me and my husband are able to enjoy Netflix time together, and every time I'm visiting with my family, we watch Netflix too. That's my personal story of access to the CVAA. In sum, the impact of these two laws on my life, the ADA and the CVAA, has been amazing. We have come such a long way, but our work is not done. The NAD is dedicated to continuing to work with the Federal Communications Commission and our other allies to achieve the goal of 100% quality captioning access. And again, I want to thank you for inviting me to be here today.
Thank you very, very much, Zainab. Thank you. And I know that the FCC, many people have said we have, obviously some work to do, and it's true, and we need to work together to make it happen. I think we probably could have lunch once a month with all the various folks at maybe DOJ across the mall. That might get something done. That's my personal comment. Anyway, so last but no way least, we have John Paré from the National Federation of the Blind. John?
All right, great. I need to flip. Oh, there it goes. Okay. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is John Paré. I'm the Executive Director of Advocacy and Policy with the National Federation of the Blind. I've been asked to comment a little bit on the television emergency alerts. These are the alerts you have on your television that tell you maybe that a storm's coming in, or hopefully not a terrorist activity, or maybe even school closings, snow alerts and things that scroll across the bottom of your television. I'm a blind person. As you can imagine, as these, I hear the beep, 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 but then I'm not able to see the emergency alerts, and that is a tremendous problem with access. The CVAA requires now that these emergency alerts be accessible to visually, non-visually, to blind people. This is a tremendous step forward and much appreciated. I'm going to give you some context to this and comment a little bit more on how this positively affects the lives of anyone who is not able to see the emergency alert. First, to kind of give you a little bit of the understanding of the size of the population. Got to remind everyone, if you forgot, there's 308 million people in the United States. Typically, the statistics cited most frequently in terms of the number of legally blind or totally blind people, kind of people who would clearly not be able to see the emergency alert, is about 1.3 million people in the United States. If you extend that to low vision people who probably are not able to drive and are not able to read most print, that goes up to about 3 million people, depending on exactly which source you go to. If you go to folks that report having trouble seeing, this is a number collected by the census, and these are people self-reporting that they have trouble seeing. These are the same people that could have trouble with these emergency alerts. That's about 20 million people. And then I find another very interesting statistic is just the people who use some type of contacts or glasses. Now, they certainly could have 20/20 vision, but I think of them a little bit as an affinity group, and that's about 225 million people in the United States. 3 out of every 4 people use some sort of correction to get their vision up. So the thing about the emergency alerts maybe is to think a little bit about what I'm going to give 3 little scenarios. I really appreciated all the personal stories here, and I want to cite 3 people that I know quite well that utilize the emergency alerts. These are all blind people. The first one is a gentleman that works for me. He's totally blind from birth. His name is Chris. He's a movie aficionado, watches TV a lot, and he gets around town a lot. His job requires him to be moving around town. and the impact that would have with him if he is unaware of impending storms that he's going out. It's not just a matter of getting wet. Whether there's hail, wind, snow, and like he walks to work like I do myself, and the importance of having access to these emergency alerts. Next is a person I know, Melissa. She's totally blind, has 3 young children. One's in probably about 2nd grade, and the other 2 are younger. And the safety of her children is critical, and the knowledge about the storms that might be coming up or other information that's being displayed on these emergency alerts. This could be even things in the winter about snow closing and school closing. And for order for her to be an effective mom and to do the same thing that her sighted peers do requires her to have non-visual access to these emergency alerts. It's absolutely essential. Last, I'm going to mention this woman, Carol. Carol is a totally blind person. She uses a walker. She's more of an older American. I think of her a lot like my mom. My mom's not blind, but my mom uses a walker. She has very poor balance. And so if she thinks that there's going to be any deviation in the weather, she wouldn't go outside because she can barely get around in good weather, and bad weather could result in a fall. And for older Americans, that can be, that could even be life-threatening. Certainly my mom, for example, has fallen twice and each time has broken a bone. So Carol, my friend, it's critical for her to know the weather. And as an older American who does go to she goes to church, she goes to the doctor, she needs to go to the grocery store. In order for her to fully participate, she has to have access to this emergency information. So in all these cases, the work that the CVAA is doing to help make this information available non-visually to blind people is an incredible step forward. And on behalf of them, I thank and I know the panel thanks the FCC and all the work that's been done to get us to this point. Maybe just make sure we remember that the 2 kind of halves to the equation, and this came up at a panel here about a month or 2 ago, is that we got to make sure that the most of the accessibility emergency alerts are made accessible through the secondary audio programming, the SAP channel, and that they right now that's you frequently get the alert and you'll need to know that you need to switch over, turn on the SAP. It will be important that you can do that efficiently and quickly, and that it doesn't take so long that you miss the entire alert. So the combination of transmitting the emergency alert in an audio format together with making sure that you can get to that audio alert in an accessible and efficient way is very important, and I appreciate the focus that the FCC is doing on that. And then also, as you can imagine, to keep concentrating on the use of the SAP channel. There's also frequently used for the foreign language content, which can create some conflict with the information being transmitted either as video description or now as emergency alerts, and that's something that the FCC needs to consider to make sure that we don't have a conflict and that all these different things can be serviced in the best possible way. And then, as some of my colleagues do, I would like to put in, along with the tremendous work that's been done to move forward with the Americans with Disabilities Act, I was at the White House for the 20th anniversary, and just a few days ago for the 25th anniversary celebration. And on the 20th anniversary, the Internet regulations, NPRM, came out, and it really would be great if the White House and the Department of Justice would have put out the NPRM. It's now been 5 years, and nothing's happened. And I wish that, seeing the great example being set here from the FCC, I look forward to some of the other agencies following the good lead of the chairman here and the talk that he gave and the work you've done in convening this council to make sure that we do even more in the next 5 years than we did in the previous 25. And I thank you.
Thank you, John. As you can see, there are a whole host of issues, and they are very diverse. And DRO and CGB and the FCC and everyone are continuing to we're leaving no stone unturned as we continue moving forward here. So I want to thank everyone for coming here to share your stories and your ongoing support. We look forward to here at the Commission. I'll turn it over to Karen for closing remarks. Karen?
You know, the various celebrations at the White House are very memorable, and those of us who attended them will remember them, but I think that today is just as or even more memorable. This has been truly extraordinary. Thank you, Sunny, Claude, Eric, Eddie, Lisa, Rebecca, Mark, Zainab, and John. Your testimonials have been absolutely extraordinary, as shown by the fact that some people left without even getting cake. So they were actually truly enjoying what you had to say, as did I. We appreciate your time. Thank you so much to everybody for coming, and please do enjoy in the refreshments. Thank you, and happy anniversary, ADA and CVAA.